Welcome back. Hey, every scar has a story, every betrayal leaves a mark, and every secret eventually comes to light. From heartbreaking family conflicts to shocking relationship betrayals, these emotional stories will take you through pain, resilience, and the moments when karma finally comes knocking. Don't forget to subscribe. Your next unforgettable tale starts now. My fiancée laughed while her father called me a gold digger at our engagement party. So I quietly took back the ring, slipped it into my pocket, and walked away without saying a single word. Here's how it happened. My name is Malcolm Turner, and until that night, I believed I had finally found the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I was 36 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and working as a senior commercial construction project manager. The job paid well, but nothing about my lifestyle screamed wealth. I drove a dependable pickup truck, owned a modest three-bedroom house I had purchased years earlier, and believed financial security mattered more than appearances. My fiancée, Simone Brooks, often joked that I was the most boring, responsible man alive. I always took it as affection. Looking back, I should have realized she wasn't complimenting me. Simone and I met at a community fundraiser organized by a local housing nonprofit. She was elegant, outgoing, and impossible to ignore. She worked in luxury residential sales, knew everyone in the room, and carried herself with effortless confidence. I admired how easily she connected with people, while she claimed she admired how calm and dependable I was. Our personalities balanced each other, or at least that's what I believed. During our first year together, she never complained about my simple habits. We cooked dinner at home, explored nearby parks, and spent weekends helping my aunt renovate older homes for first-time buyers. The first warning came 6 months into our relationship when Simone invited me to dinner with her parents. Her father, Bernard Brooks, had built a respected real estate development company over 3 decades. Their home overlooked Lake Norman and reflected years of success without being flashy. Bernard asked polite questions about my career before casually asking how much I earned. I laughed, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. When I answered only in general terms, his smile disappeared. He leaned back and said, "A man should never be embarrassed by his income unless he doesn't have one." Simone chuckled softly before changing the subject. Driving home that night, I admitted the conversation made me uncomfortable. Simone squeezed my hand and dismissed it immediately. "That's just my dad. He sizes everyone up. Don't take it personally." I wanted to believe her because everything else between us still felt genuine. Besides, Bernard was nearing 70. I convinced myself he belonged to a generation that valued financial transparency differently than mine. Instead of seeing disrespect, I labeled it awkward honesty. That decision would cost me far more than I imagined. Over the following year, Bernard continued testing me in subtle ways. Every family dinner became another interview. He asked about my mortgage balance, retirement accounts, investments, and long-term earning potential. When I answered vaguely, he accused me of lacking ambition. When I answered honestly, he compared me to men who earned twice as much. Simone never defended me. She would smile awkwardly, refill someone's glass, or redirect the conversation. Afterward, she always insisted her father meant well. Eventually, I stopped responding altogether. Silence felt easier than constant conflict. What Bernard never knew was that I had inherited discipline rather than money. My parents worked multiple jobs while raising my youngest sister and me in Durham. My father repaired school buses during the day and landscaping equipment on weekends. My mother managed a nursing home kitchen. They taught us that respect mattered more than status. By the time I graduated college, I had almost no student debt because I worked every summer on construction crews. Success came slowly, but every achievement belonged entirely to me. I carried that quiet pride into adulthood. 3 years before meeting Simone, I purchased an aging duplex with money I had carefully saved. I renovated it myself during evenings and weekends before renting both units. The rental income eventually covered the mortgage while helping me save for another investment property. None of this looked impressive from the outside. I rarely discussed it because I believed money should create freedom, not attention. Even Simone knew only the basics. Whenever she asked detailed questions, I simply said I preferred keeping finances private until marriage. That answer gradually frustrated her. She insisted couples preparing for marriage should share everything. I agreed in principle, but timing mattered. We hadn't even scheduled a wedding date yet. My attorney had advised me to organize my assets before combining finances with anyone. My parents divorced after years of arguments over debt, and I promised myself I would approach marriage carefully. Simone interpreted my caution as secrecy. Bernard interpreted it as proof that I was hiding something. One Saturday afternoon, Simone invited me to tour luxury homes she was showing to potential buyers. As we walked through a 12,000-square-foot estate, she joked that someday we'd own something similar. I smiled and reminded her I preferred manageable homes over oversized ones. She frowned. Sometimes I think you don't dream big enough. I answered that financial peace mattered more to me than impressing strangers. She laughed, but something in her expression suggested disappointment rather than amusement. It was the first time our visions of success noticeably collided. Despite those differences, our relationship still contained enough good moments to keep me hopeful. She supported me during stressful construction deadlines. I attended every major event in her career. We traveled to Savannah, Nashville, and Washington, D.C., sharing memories that felt authentic. Friends described us as balanced because my patience softened her impulsiveness while her energy encouraged me to experience new things. Looking back, I wonder whether they simply saw what we wanted them to see. When I proposed, I chose Freedom Park in Charlotte just before sunset. We had spent countless evenings there during our first year together. I knelt beside the same lake where we once talked for hours after our third date. The ring wasn't the largest diamond available, but it was carefully chosen and paid for in full. Simone cried, hugged me tightly, and said yes before I finished asking the question. For a while, I believed that single moment outweighed every uncomfortable conversation with her father. Soon after the engagement, Bernard insisted on hosting a formal celebration at an upscale hotel in downtown Charlotte. He claimed both families deserved an elegant evening before wedding planning officially began. My mother thought the gesture was generous. My sister felt something was off. She quietly asked whether Bernard had finally accepted me. I answered honestly that I wasn't sure, but I hoped the engagement party represented a fresh start. Sometimes hope blinds us more effectively than denial. During the weeks leading up to the party, Bernard became unusually friendly. He complimented my work ethic, asked about wedding plans without criticism, and even shook my hand warmly during one family dinner. Simone noticed the change too. "See," she said, "I told you he'd come around." I wanted to believe her. My mother reminded me that relationships with in-laws often improved after engagement because commitment removed uncertainty. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to relax around Bernard. The ballroom looked beautiful that evening. White roses decorated every table. Soft jazz floated through the room while family members and close friends celebrated what everyone believed would become a lasting marriage. Simone wore a navy blue dress that perfectly matched the sapphire earrings her late grandmother had left her. Watching her laugh with relatives, I felt grateful. Whatever difficulties lay behind us, I believed we were finally building a future together. Dinner unfolded smoothly, and for nearly 2 hours I allowed myself to believe my concerns had been exaggerated. My mother and sister laughed comfortably with Simone's relatives. Friends from work congratulated us, sharing stories about marriage and long-lasting relationships. Bernard even complimented the meal and thanked everyone for attending. Watching him smile so naturally made me wonder whether I had misjudged him all along. I caught Simone looking at me from across the room, and she smiled with the kind of warmth that reminded me why I had proposed in the first place. For a brief moment, the future looked exactly as I had imagined it. Then Bernard tapped his champagne glass with a spoon and stood to make a toast. The conversations faded until the ballroom fell silent. He began by praising family, commitment, and the importance of choosing the right spouse. His opening remarks sounded sincere enough that several guests nodded along. He thanked everyone for supporting Simone over the years and spoke proudly about watching his daughter become a successful professional. I relaxed, expecting him to end with a blessing for our future together. Instead, his expression changed. He turned toward me with a smile that never reached his eyes. You know, he said, people have asked me what I think about Malcolm. A few guests laughed politely. Bernard lifted his glass. I'll admit, when a hard-working man with an ordinary salary proposes to a woman from a family that's built real wealth, a father naturally wonders about his intentions. The room became noticeably quieter. I suppose some people would call that love. He paused. I call it a pretty good investment. Scattered laughter echoed across the ballroom. At first I thought I had misunderstood him. Then Bernard continued. Let's be honest. If my daughter worked a regular office job and lived in an apartment instead of growing up around success, would Malcolm still be standing here tonight? A louder wave of laughter followed. Someone at another table muttered, "That's cold." Bernard shrugged dramatically. I'm only asking the questions everyone else is too polite to ask. My chest tightened. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I didn't care what strangers thought. I cared about one person, Simone. I looked directly at her, waiting for her to stand beside me, waiting for her to say, "Dad, enough." Waiting for her to remind everyone that love isn't measured by bank accounts. Instead, she laughed, not an uncomfortable chuckle, not the nervous laugh people make when they don't know what else to do. She laughed openly, covering her mouth while shaking her head as though her father had just delivered the funniest joke of the evening. Bernard noticed her reaction and grew even bolder. You see, he said, pointing toward his daughter. Even Simone knows I'm kidding. She smiled. Oh, Daddy. But she never corrected him, never defended me, never said he had crossed the line. She simply stood there, smiling while my dignity became entertainment. That hurt more than anything Bernard could have said. My mother slowly lowered her fork onto her plate. My youngest sister stared at Simone in disbelief. One of my closest friends looked at me as if asking whether he should intervene. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than Bernard's words. I realized something in that moment. Humiliation doesn't always come from insults. Sometimes it comes from discovering exactly how little the people closest to you value your feelings. Bernard wasn't finished. He raised his glass one last time. Malcolm, don't take this personally. Then he smiled. If you truly love my daughter, you'll prove me wrong by signing a prenuptial agreement that guarantees you don't walk away with a single dollar from this family. A few people awkwardly shifted in their chairs. Others looked down at their plates. The celebration had become a courtroom, and I was the defendant. I waited. One final time. I looked at Simone. She shrugged lightly and said the words that ended our future. Is only joking. Don't be so sensitive. Something inside me became perfectly calm. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. For months I had convinced myself that respect would eventually arrive. Instead, I had just learned it had never existed. Without saying a word, I walked toward Simone. The ballroom became completely silent. She smiled awkwardly, assuming I was about to kiss her or whisper something. Instead, I gently reached for her left hand. She frowned. What are you doing? I carefully slid the engagement ring from her finger. She didn't resist because she still didn't understand. Neither did anyone else. I looked at the ring resting in my palm. It represented thousands of dollars, months of planning, years of hope. Most importantly, it represented trust. Trust that had just been laughed out of the room. I slipped the ring into my jacket pocket. Then I looked at Bernard. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. Marriage should never begin where respect doesn't exist. I turned toward Simone. She looked confused instead of apologetic. Malcolm, I interrupted softly. I waited for you to choose us. You chose the joke. For the first time all evening, her smile disappeared. People around us remained frozen. No one reached for a phone. No one applauded. No dramatic scene unfolded. Just complete silence. I walked over to my mother. I'm sorry you had to witness this. She hugged me tightly. You have nothing to apologize for. My sister picked up her purse without saying a word. As the three of us headed toward the ballroom doors, Bernard called after me. So that's it. I stopped walking but never turned around. Yes. His answer came wrapped in laughter. I guess I struck a nerve. I kept walking. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt unreal. No one spoke. My mother quietly wiped tears from her eyes. My sister finally broke the silence. You were about to marry someone who watched your humiliation like it was dinner entertainment. I stayed through the windshield after getting into my truck. I know. It was the only sentence I could manage. Halfway home, my phone exploded with messages. Some friends apologized for what had happened. Others claimed Bernard had only been teasing. A few insisted I had overreacted. Then Simone called. I let it ring. She called again and again. By the time I reached home, she had called 12 times and sent more than 20 text messages. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I placed the engagement ring inside my bedroom safe, locked the door, and sat alone in complete silence, realizing the woman I love had never truly stood beside me when it mattered most. The next morning, I woke after barely 2 hours of sleep. My phone was still buzzing with missed calls, voice messages, and texts. I ignored all of them. Instead, I made coffee, sat on my back porch, and replayed the previous night over and over in my mind. I wasn't searching for a different ending anymore. I was searching for the exact moment I had mistaken tolerance for love. Every warning sign I had dismissed suddenly returned with painful clarity. Bernard's endless questions, Simone's silence, the jokes that always came at my expense. None of it had been accidental. Around 9 that morning, there was a knock at my front door. It was Simone. She stood on my porch wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. The moment I opened the door, she removed them. Her eyes were swollen, but I couldn't tell whether she had been crying or simply hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind me. "I don't think there's much left to say." She folded her arms. "So you're really ending our engagement over one joke?" I looked at her for several seconds before answering. "It wasn't your father's joke that ended our engagement." She frowned. "It was your laughter." She immediately shook her head. "Oh, come on, Malcolm. You're making this bigger than it was. I waited for you to stop him. He was just being himself. And you were just being yourself." Those words landed harder than I intended. For the first time, she looked genuinely offended. "You know what? You're acting incredibly dramatic." The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Not once did Simone apologize. Instead, she insisted I had embarrassed her by walking out of the party. She claimed guests were talking about my temperament. She even suggested I owed her parents an apology for ruining the evening. I listened without interrupting. When she finally finished, I calmly answered, "I don't want the ring back because of what your father said." She looked confused. "I want it back because I finally understand who you are." Without another word, I walked back inside and locked the door. By Monday morning, the story had spread far beyond our families. Some mutual friends called to check on me. Others had already chosen sides. The surprising part wasn't that Bernard had twisted the story. It was how convincingly he did it. According to him, I had become angry after someone suggested signing a prenuptial agreement because I had expected to benefit from the Brooks family's wealth. In his version of events, I stormed out because my plan had failed. People who barely knew me believed him. People who had known me for years called asking uncomfortable questions. One call hurt more than all the others. It came from my pastor. He had counseled Simone and me before our engagement. He gently asked if there was any truth to the rumors. I wasn't angry with him. He simply wanted to hear my side. After explaining what actually happened, he became very quiet. Finally, he said, "A person who truly loves you protects your dignity even when it's inconvenient." Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. The following week became one of the hardest periods of my life. Everywhere I went, I wondered who had heard Bernard's version of the story. At work, I caught coworkers whispering before suddenly changing the subject when I walked by. No one confronted me directly, but I could feel the curiosity. Even my confidence began slipping. For the first time in years, I questioned whether keeping my private life private had allowed other people to define me. The worst betrayal came from someone I had considered a brother. Derek, one of my closest friends for nearly 15 years, invited me to lunch. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, he leaned across the table. "Look, man." I nodded. "If you were hoping to marry into money, there's no shame in admitting it." I stared at him. He actually believed it. Everything we had shared over 15 years meant less than one false story. I quietly paid for my meal, stood up, and walked away. That friendship ended without another conversation. 2 weeks after the engagement ended, an unexpected letter arrived from an attorney's office. For a brief moment, I thought Simone wanted to settle something related to the wedding deposits. Instead, the envelope contained something far stranger. Bernard's lawyers formally requested documentation proving that every financial contribution I had made toward the engagement party had been reimbursed. Attached was a letter implying that I might owe the Brooks family additional costs for damages resulting from my abrupt departure. I read it twice before laughing in disbelief. Then I handed it to my attorney. He smiled. "This isn't a legal document. It's intimidation." My attorney, Evelyn Harris, had represented me years earlier during the purchase of my rental properties. After reviewing everything, she leaned back in her chair. "Malcolm, I need to ask you something." I nodded. "Did Simone ever know exactly what you own?" "No." "What about her father?" "Not even close." She smiled thoughtfully. "Good." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands. "Because I have a feeling they made a very expensive assumption." I frowned at Evelyn's comment, unsure what she meant. She opened the folder I had brought and neatly arranged several documents across a desk. There were property deeds, tax records, investment account summaries, and copies of business agreements I had accumulated over the previous decade. She tapped the papers one by one. "From everything you've shown me, you don't just have a salary." I nodded. "No, you have appreciating real estate, rental income, retirement investments, and a minority ownership stake in a construction firm. None of this is public knowledge. It was never supposed to be." She smiled. "Then keep it that way." Years earlier, my former supervisor had invited me to invest in a small commercial construction company that specialized in restoring historic buildings across the Carolinas and Virginia. I wasn't wealthy enough to buy a controlling share, but I invested every spare dollar I had after purchasing my duplex. It meant postponing vacations, driving the same truck for years, and saying no to countless unnecessary expenses. The company grew slowly, painfully slowly. There were years when I questioned whether the investment would ever amount to anything. But I never sold my shares. Only 4 people knew the full extent of my finances: my accountant, my attorney, my financial advisor, and my mother. Not because I was hiding riches, but because I had learned early that privacy protects peace. My father used to say, "The loudest wallet in the room usually belongs to the poorest investor." I carried those words into adulthood. To most people, I looked like an ordinary project manager with an ordinary life. I preferred it that way. Evelyn slid Bernard's attorney's letter back into its envelope. "They expected you to panic." I almost did. "They also expected you to reveal your finances to defend yourself." I looked at her. She continued, "Don't. If people believe lies today, let them. The truth doesn't become stronger because you announce it." That advice wasn't easy to follow. Every instinct wanted to clear my name. Instead, I stayed silent. Silence came with a price. Over the next several months, invitations stopped arriving. Couples we used to spend weekends with slowly disappeared. One friend canceled a fishing trip without explanation. Another removed me from a group chat that had existed for nearly a decade. I wasn't just mourning a broken engagement anymore. I was grieving an entire community I hadn't realized depended on one family's opinion of me. Loneliness settled into my evenings like unwanted company. Work became my refuge. Instead of dwelling on gossip, I volunteered for the most demanding commercial renovation projects available. Long hours left little time for self-pity. I arrived before sunrise and often left after dark. My crews respected consistency more than rumors, and the job reminded me that buildings didn't care about opinions. They responded only to careful planning, honest effort, and patience. Brick by brick, beam by beam, progress became measurable again. Unlike relationships, one Friday afternoon, the company's managing partners called an unexpected meeting. I assumed it concerned a delayed project in Raleigh. Instead, the senior partner, Leonard Watkins, closed the conference room door and smiled. "We've accepted an offer." I looked around the room. "What offer?" He pushed a folder toward each shareholder. A nationally recognized construction group had agreed to acquire our company after months of confidential negotiations. The purchase price exceeded anything I had imagined. My minority ownership suddenly became worth several $1 million. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The room erupted with quiet handshakes rather than cheers. That was the culture Leonard had built. Professional, measured, private. As the meeting ended, Leonard placed a hand on my shoulder. You've been here since almost the beginning. I appreciate that. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the engagement party. Hope, not because I had become wealthy overnight, because my future no longer depended on proving anyone wrong. The acquisition remained confidential until the legal paperwork was finalized. For nearly 4 months, I continued living exactly as before. I drove the same pickup truck, mowed my own lawn, collected rent from my duplex, stopped for coffee at the same neighborhood cafe every Saturday morning. Nothing about my daily life changed. That consistency became surprisingly comforting. Success didn't need an audience. One crisp autumn afternoon, while leaving a hardware store in Charlotte, I unexpectedly saw Simone for the first time in nearly a year. She almost walked past me before recognizing me. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. She looked polished as always, but there was an exhaustion behind her smile that I didn't remember. Malcolm. I nodded politely. Simone. She glanced toward the parking lot, then back at me. I heard you've been doing well. I've been doing fine. She hesitated as though expecting me to ask about her life. I didn't. The silence between us felt strangely familiar. Only this time, it belonged to me. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? And if you love emotional stories filled with shocking twists, betrayal, and satisfying karma, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new story from Emma Details. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next tale.